The November rain hammered Chicago's streets like nails driven into concrete, turning the pavement outside Mercer's diner into a black mirror that reflected neon signs in broken fragments. The clock above the register read 11:24 p.m. Cassandra Cole stood frozen behind the counter, staring through the rain-streaked window as 15 black SUVs pulled to the curb in perfect synchronization. 30 men stepped out simultaneously. Their coats were black. Their movements were choreographed. Water streamed off their shoulders like they were walking through a baptism. Her hands trembled. The coffee pot tilted. Hot liquid spilled across the laminate counter, pooling near the register, and she watched it spread without moving to stop it. Preston Mercer emerged from the kitchen, his face draining white the moment he saw them. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again like a fish pulled from water that could not remember how to breathe. The diner went silent. Every customer froze mid-bite. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold their humming breath. The lead man pushed through the door. He was tall, 6'2" at least, with dark hair that fell in waves past his collar and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow like a blade had once tried to cut his face in half. His coat was charcoal gray, cashmere, worth more than 6 months of Cassandra's wages. His name was Vinny. He walked directly to the counter. He did not look at Preston. He did not look at any of the customers frozen in their booths. His eyes found Cassandra's with the precision of a hunter who had already marked his target. "Cassandra Marie Cole," he said. His voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet. Every muscle in her body locked tight. "She's nobody," Preston stammered, stepping forward. His chef's whites were stained with tomato sauce and grease. "Just a waitress. She works for me." "She's not." Vinny did not touch him. He simply turned his head and looked at Preston. The look lasted 3 seconds. Preston's mouth dried up. His skin became the color of old newspaper. He stepped backward without speaking another word. Vinny extended his hand toward Cassandra. "Palm up." Unthreatening. "We are not here to hurt you," he said. "We are here to bring you home." Cassandra's spine pressed against the coffee machine behind her, the exact spot where Preston's fist had landed 3 days ago, leaving a bruise the color of rotted plums that stretched from her ribs to her hip bone. She could not go backward anymore. She could only stay pressed against the machine or move forward into whatever this was. "I don't know you," she whispered. "No," Vinny agreed. "But my boss knows you. And what my boss knows, he does not forget." Preston lurched forward. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, the left one, the one with the scars running in white lines up her forearm like a map of every night she had spent wondering if she was worth staying alive for. His grip was tight. Bruising. A promise of what would come later when these men were gone. "She is not going anywhere," Preston said. His voice had found its courage again, or what he mistook for courage. "She works for me. She does that until I say she doesn't." Vinny turned to face Preston. He did not move quickly. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at him, really looked at him, and in that look was every terrible thing Preston Mercer had ever done, catalogued and understood and judged. Preston's hand fell away from Cassandra's wrist as if the bones had suddenly gone hollow. "Get your things," Vinny said to Cassandra. "Not a request. You have 2 minutes." She moved like a ghost, like someone watching her own body from very far away. She untied her apron, the gray one, stained with coffee and the blood from a cut on her palm that she had wrapped in duct tape because Band-Aids cost money she did not have. She did not look at the other waitresses. She did not look at Preston. She simply walked to the staff room in the back, grabbed her jacket, a denim thing from a thrift store, worn thin at the elbows, and found her purse shoved under the sink where she kept it. $200 were in that purse. $200 to her name after 8 years of double shifts, of eating the cold fries customers left on their plates, of rationing her medications because the prescription cost $40 a month and she could not always afford it. When she walked back to the counter, the diner had become a strange tableau of frozen people. 14 customers stared straight ahead as if any movement might draw attention to themselves. Preston stood behind the register, his face purple with rage and humiliation, his hands clenched into fists. Vinny held the door open. The November wind rushed in, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the distant rumble of the elevated train tracks that ran 3 blocks away. "After you," he said. She walked into the rain. 14 men flanked the sidewalk, their shoulders broad, their eyes forward. A 15th man opened the rear door of the first SUV. The interior was leather and climate-controlled silence. Vinny gestured for her to enter. She climbed in. The door closed with a sound like the ceiling of a tomb. The SUV pulled into traffic. Cassandra watched Chicago disappear through the rain-streaked windows. The streets of her neighborhood, the neighborhood where she had eaten 2 meals a day in the cheapest diners, where she had cleaned houses for $40, where she had walked home at 3 in the morning because the bus cost money, gave way to better streets, then to better neighborhoods, then to neighborhoods that looked like a different city entirely. 30 minutes later, the SUVs pulled through gates made of wrought iron. Beyond them lay a mansion that rose 5 stories into the Chicago night, its windows glowing like golden eyes. The grounds were lit by landscape lights that cast everything in a dreamlike warmth. A fountain in the circular driveway threw water into the air in perfect arcs. Cassandra had never been in a house this large. The SUV stopped. Vinny climbed out, extended his hand again, and helped her from the vehicle. Pietro stood near the fountain. This was not information she was given, but somehow she knew his name. He was shorter than Vinny, broader, with grey threading through his dark hair and a gold watch that caught the light. He smiled at her, but it was the smile of someone seeing a ghost. "Come," Vinny said. "He is waiting." Inside the mansion, the floors were marble. The ceilings were Corford. Paintings hung on the walls that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. She walked beside Vinny through hallway after hallway, up a staircase that curved like the spine of something ancient, down a corridor lined with doors. He stopped at one. Knocked 3 times. A voice called from inside, "Enter." Vinny opened the door and stepped aside. Cassandra saw a study illuminated by firelight. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A man sat behind a desk of dark wood, his hands folded before him, waiting. He was tall. She could see this even seated. His hair was black, shot through with silver at the temples, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, and on his right hand sat a gold signet ring carved with the initial M. This was Matteo Conti. "Close the door," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Vinny closed the door, leaving her alone with him. Matteo rose from his chair. He was broad-shouldered, muscular in the way of someone who did not go to gyms but simply demanded strength from his body, and his body obeyed. His shirt was white, open at the collar, and she could see the glint of a gold chain against his chest. "You helped someone yesterday," he said. Not a question. She could not speak. Her throat had closed. The rain-slick platform of the Clark Street station flashed through her mind, the man who had stumbled, bleeding from a wound on his temple, disoriented, calling for help that no one gave him until she did. Yes, she managed. You wrapped him in your apron. Your only clean apron. You sat with him for 43 minutes while you waited for an ambulance. You held his hand when the paramedics came. You told them his name was Michael, that he was kind, that someone needed to know he was kind before they took him away. He was hurt, she said. The words came out like a prayer. Like a candle in the wind. No one was helping him. Matteo stepped around the desk. He moved slowly, deliberately, each movement controlled. When he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive, like cedar and smoke, he stopped. That man's name is Micah Conti, he said. He is my son. 3 years ago, a boat he was on capsized in Lake Michigan. The doctors said he should have drowned. He almost did. When I pulled him from the water, I thought I had lost him twice, once to the lake and once to the trauma that followed. He speaks very rarely now. When he does, it is only about things that matter. Matteo paused. He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, and in them she saw something she had not seen directed at her in 8 years. She saw recognition. Yesterday, he continued, Micah spoke. He told me about the woman who helped him. He said her hands were cold and her voice was kind. He said she sat with him in the wet and the darkness and did not leave. He said she did not know me. But she stayed. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. She did not understand why. She did not understand any of this. Why am I here? She whispered. Because, Matteo said, a man who has everything material can lose it all and survive. But a man who loses faith in human kindness dies a slower death. You gave my son something last night that I could not purchase with all my money. You gave him proof that goodness still exists. That someone, somewhere, still stops to help a stranger in the rain. He extended his hand. Not threatening. Never threatening. I want to offer you something in exchange, he said. A job. Protection. A place to belong. Cassandra looked at his hand. She thought about Preston Mercer. She thought about the $200 in her purse. She thought about the 8 years that had led her to a diner counter, counting tips in quarters, hiding bruises beneath long sleeves, pretending to be invisible because invisible meant safe. She thought about a man she did not know, bleeding on a subway platform, and how she had chosen to stay with him anyway. She took Matteo's hand. His grip was warm. Solid. Like being anchored to the earth when you have been floating for a very long time. What is your name? He asked, though he already knew. Cassandra, she said. Cassandra Cole. Welcome home, Cassandra Cole, Matteo Conti said. Your life begins now. Behind them, through the study window, the November rain fell upon Chicago like a benediction, washing the streets clean, preparing them for whatever would come next. The November rain fell on Chicago like a curse that would not lift. It had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the streets into rivers of grey water that reflected nothing but the sky's own despair. Cassandra Cole arrived at Mercer's diner at 4:44 in the morning, her second-hand coat soaked through at the shoulders, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the tile floor as she pushed through the kitchen door. The air inside was thick with the smell of burned grease and bleach, that particular combination that meant survival, that meant another shift was beginning, that meant she would count her hours in minutes and her minutes in dollars. She hung her coat on the hook beside the employee bathroom. Her uniform hung there too, the apron stained yellow with coffee rings that had calcified into brown, permanent marks of 8 years of service. She tied it around her waist and stepped into the walk-in freezer to begin prep work. The cold bit into her arms, but she did not shiver. She had learned long ago that showing discomfort meant weakness, and weakness was currency in Preston Mercer's world. At 4:59 in the morning, Preston emerged from his office. He was 47 years old but carried himself like a man 10 years younger, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive grey shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His watch was gold. His shoes were Italian leather. He had a way of moving through the diner like he owned not just the building but the air inside it, the light, the very breath the employees took while standing on his floor. He saw Cassandra arranging eggs in the cooler and his eyes narrowed. "You are 12 minutes late," he said. Cassandra glanced at her phone without turning around. "I am 15 minutes early." Preston stepped closer. She could smell his cologne, something sharp and synthetic. "Your shift starts when I say it starts. Docking you an hour." Her jaw clenched but she nodded once, a small movement he barely saw. She had learned this too, that argument was a luxury, that resistance cost more than compliance, that Preston Mercer was the kind of man who smiled wider the more you hurt. He smiled now, satisfied, and walked back toward his office. The breakfast rush began at 6:15. The diner filled with construction workers and night shift nurses and old men who came for the coffee and the company of other old men. Cassandra moved between tables like a ghost, refilling cups, clearing plates, writing orders in her small, precise handwriting. She smiled at every customer. She thanked them when they left. She never let them see the calculation happening behind her eyes, how much this table would tip, how much that table would leave her short. By noon, she had cleared $37 for 6 hours of work. At 12:51 in the afternoon, Preston walked past the register where she was counting her tips into a small pile of coins and crumpled bills. Without breaking stride, he reached down and scooped half of it into his palm. Quarters and dimes and a single dollar bill disappeared into his pocket. "Kitchen fee," he said. She did not respond. There was nothing to say. This happened 3 times a week, sometimes 4. The theft was never quite large enough to justify confrontation, never quite small enough to ignore. By the time her double shift ended at 11:34 in the evening, Cassandra had earned approximately $73 total. After Preston's kitchen fees, she had $47. She placed this money carefully into her shoe, into the hidden compartment she had created using electrical tape and careful folding. In her purse, she kept the remaining $200 of her life savings, separated into 2 separate hiding places in case one was discovered. She changed out of her uniform in the basement storage room, the same room where she changed every day, the same room where she had learned to check her body for new bruises without looking at the mirror. Tonight there was a fresh one on her ribs, a purple bloom the size of a fist. 3 days old but still tender. She traced it with her fingers, memorizing the shape, adding it to the map of previous injuries that marked her like a topographic chart of hell. The oldest scars were white and raised, some 8 years old, some from before she even knew Preston Mercer existed. She never told anyone. Who would believe her? Preston was charming to customers, donated to the church, coached Little League. He had a way of making himself appear decent to the world while ensuring that those closest to him understood the true shape of his capacity for cruelty. The Red Line platform at 11:52 in the evening was nearly empty. 2 people waited at the far end, a couple holding hands, oblivious. Cassandra descended the stairs and her shoes echoed on concrete. The rain had followed her into the tunnel somehow, or perhaps it was just the dampness that lived in these underground spaces, the sense of drowning that never quite went away. That was when she saw the man. He sat slumped against the tile wall beside the bench, his head tilted back, blood trickling from his temple down toward his jaw. His expensive watch caught the fluorescent light. His dark hair was disheveled. His eyes were closed. For a moment, Cassandra stood frozen, watching the other passengers navigate around him like water flowing around a stone. No one stopped. No one even slowed down. She walked to him and knelt, her wet coat soaking against the dirty floor. "Sir, are you okay?" Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. His eyes opened. Sharp green eyes. Dangerous eyes. Eyes that seemed to look through her skin straight into the architecture of her bones. "I fell," he said. She did not believe him. Something in the way he said it, the precision of it, suggested a rehearsed line. But it did not matter. Whether he fell or whether something else had happened, he was bleeding, and she was there, and she had been taught by her mother a long time ago that this was the only choice that mattered. She unwrapped the clean apron she kept in her bag, the backup apron, the one she sometimes needed when Preston was in a mood and threw things, and pressed it gently against his wound. "You need a hospital." "No hospital," he said. "You are bleeding. Just help me to the street." So she did. She supported his weight, and he was heavy, solid, the weight of someone expensive and dangerous. They climbed the stairs together. The November rain came down like nails, sharp and relentless. At street level, he straightened, tested his balance, seemed suddenly less injured and more aware. A black car materialized from the darkness, pulling to the curb with the precision of something choreographed. He turned to face her fully. His eyes moved across her face like he was memorizing something. Like he was reading text written in a language only he understood. "What is your name?" he asked. "Cassandra Cole," she said. He nodded once, a single movement of acknowledgement. "Thank you, Cassandra Cole." The car door opened and he was gone, swallowed by leather seats and tinted glass. The car turned the corner and disappeared. Cassandra stood in the rain, soaked, apronless, and walked home to her studio apartment on the North Shore, where the heat barely worked and the radiator clanked all night like a dying animal. What she did not know was that she had just met Matteo Conti. What she did not know was that the blood on her apron was theatrical makeup, perfect and practiced. What she did not know was that she had been watched for 3 weeks, ever since the night she pulled a drowning boy from Lake Michigan without asking who he was or what his family was, a boy named Micah who belonged to a man who rarely encountered people who acted from anything other than fear or greed. The next morning, November rain still falling, November cold settling into the bones of Chicago like a permanent resident, a woman entered Mercer's diner at 9:15 in the morning. She was 52 years old but moved with the economy of motion that suggested she had never wasted a gesture in her life. Her diamond necklace caught the light. Her designer coat, cream-colored cashmere worth more than Cassandra's annual salary, hung perfectly on her shoulders. Her name was Evelyn Blackwell, and she owned the Blackwell Hotel chain, 43 properties across the Midwest, each one gleaming and polished and built on decisions she had made that had nothing to do with kindness. She sat at Cassandra's section without ordering anything. She waited. Preston emerged from the kitchen within minutes, as if he had been alerted to her presence by some frequency only they could hear. He slid into the booth across from her. Cassandra refilled coffee at the adjacent table, her movements careful, practiced at invisibility. "The girl is a liability," Evelyn said. Her voice was cool, clinical, like a surgeon discussing an infection. "She is nobody," Preston replied. "Make sure it stays that way." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Cassandra, cold and appraising, the way you might examine a piece of furniture you were considering discarding. Then Evelyn rose, placed a penny on the table, a deliberate insult, and walked out into the rain. Cassandra's hand trembled picking up that penny. 24 hours later, at 11:51 in the evening, Cassandra was wiping down tables when the rain outside suddenly stopped reflecting headlights. It began reflecting something else entirely. Metal. Black metal. Organized metal. The kitchen door opened. "Close up," Preston said. His voice was different. Thin. Afraid. She turned toward the window. 30 black SUVs lined the street outside Mercer's diner, their engines rumbling, their headlights creating a wall of light so bright it turned everything to white. Men in dark suits began stepping out of the vehicles. Measured. Unhurried. Moving like they had all the time in the world and all the certainty of people who had never been refused. They did not carry guns. They did not need to. Preston's face had gone the color of old bone. And in that moment, Cassandra understood that her life, which had been so small for so long, was about to become very, very large. The rain hammered against the windows of Mercer's diner at 11:11 in the evening, and in that moment, Cassandra Cole felt the world shift beneath her feet like a blade cutting through silk. The kitchen door had swung open 5 minutes earlier. Preston's face had gone the color of old bone. And through the glass, she could see them. 30 black SUVs lined the street outside, their engines rumbling, their headlights creating a wall of light so bright it turned everything to white. Men in dark suits began stepping out of the vehicles. Measured. Unhurried. Moving like they had all the time in the world and all the certainty of people who had never been refused. Preston emerged from the kitchen, his apron still stained with grease, his voice thin and reedy. "What the hell is this?" Cassandra watched his hands tremble as he wiped them on his pants. The other customers had gone silent. The coffee machine seemed impossibly loud, hissing steam into the quiet. The first man through the door was lean, dark-haired, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw like a map of violence. Vinny. Behind him came Pietro, broader, shorter, with a scar on his neck the color of old copper. They did not carry guns. They did not need to. Vinny's eyes found Cassandra immediately, and he walked toward her with the kind of certainty that made Preston step back without thinking. "Cassandra Cole," Vinny said. His voice was smooth, like oil poured over gravel. "Mr. Conti requests your presence." Preston's face flushed red. "She is my employee. She stays." Vinny finally looked at Preston, and the temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You are dismissed." "Listen here," Preston started, his voice climbing higher. "I do not know who you think." Pietro stepped forward. "Just one step." Preston backed up so fast he nearly tripped over a chair. Cassandra's heart hammered against her ribs. "What is this about?" "The subway," Vinny said, his eyes never leaving hers. 3 weeks ago. You helped a man who was drowning. Or rather, a boy. You saved his son at the lake." Recognition flickered through the diner like a match striking. Customers whispered the name that followed. Matteo Conti. The man who controlled the South Side. The man whose word could end careers, end lives, end everything. Cassandra's mind raced backward. The morning she had called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, needing air, needing escape from Preston's voice, his hands, his endless cruelty. She had walked to the lakefront, where the November wind tore through her jacket like a blade wrapped in ice. The boy had been playing too close to the dock. A boat shifted. His feet found nothing but water. She did not remember deciding to jump. She remembered the cold, a shock so complete it stopped her breath. She remembered the boy's small weight, impossibly heavy, his lungs sputtering water. She remembered pressing her palm against his chest until he coughed, until he breathed, until his eyes opened. His mother had screamed thank you, but Cassandra was already walking away, soaked and shivering, needing to get back before her shift. She never gave her name. "That boy is Micah Conti," Vinny said. "The only Conti child. Mr. Conti has been looking for you since the day it happened." "I did not know," Cassandra whispered. "I just helped a kid." "Exactly," Vinny said. "That is why he wants to meet you. Not a request." Preston stepped forward, his voice cracking. "She has a shift. She is on the schedule." Pietro did not move, but his hand twitched, and Preston understood the language. He stepped back. "You have a choice," Vinny said, extending his hand to Cassandra again. "Come with us. Or stay here and let him," he gestured to Preston with his eyes, "continue what he has been doing for 8 years. Cassandra froze. "How does he know?" "Mr. Conti knows everything," Vinny said, as if he had spoken aloud. "About your back. About the tips Preston steals. About why you flinch when men raise their voices. About the $200 in your pocket that has to last you 2 more weeks." Preston's face went white. She looked around the diner, customers staring, their forks suspended, their coffee growing cold. She looked at Preston, saw something new in his face. Not anger. Fear. Raw, undiluted fear. She took Vinny's hand. The rain intensified as the black SUV pulled away from the curb, and Cassandra watched the diner disappear in the rearview mirror, watching Preston through the glass like a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Vinny sat beside her, silent. Pietro drove. The city lights streaked past like tears on a window. What she did not know was that Matteo Conti had spent 3 weeks investigating her after the lake incident. He had uncovered every bruise, every stolen tip, every scar. He had learned about her mother's prayer card, worn thin from years of Cassandra's fingers touching it in the dark. He had learned that she ate 1 meal a day and rationed her coffee. He had learned everything about the woman who jumped into freezing water for a child she did not know, and the offer he was about to make would not be about gratitude. It would be about erasing the man who had put those scars there. The Conti estate rose from the North Shore fog like something from another world. Wrought iron gates. Stone walls the color of old bone. Security lights casting everything in harsh white. Cassandra had never been to a place like this, never imagined places like this existed except in movies she could not afford to watch. Vinny led her through marble halls that echoed with every footstep. Their shoes clicked against the floor like a countdown. He stopped at a heavy wooden door, knocked once, and opened it. Matteo Conti stood by a window overlooking the lake. He wore a black suit, no tie. His chest was exposed, scarred in places, and his green eyes, the same green as his son's, assessed her with surgical precision when he turned. She recognized him instantly. The subway man. The blood was gone now. He was cleaner, sharper, more dangerous. "Sit," he said. She sat, hands in her lap, every muscle tense. "You pulled my son from the lake 3 weeks ago," Matteo said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "You left before I could thank you. I was late for my shift. You jumped into November water without hesitation." He paused. "Why?" He was drowning. Most people would have called for help. There was no time. Silence stretched between them like something alive. Matteo walked closer, stopped 5 feet away, close enough that she could smell him, something like smoke and expensive cologne and winter rain. "Preston Mercer has been stealing your tips for 8 years, he said. "He has struck you 47 times. The last time was 3 days ago when you questioned a missing paycheck." Her breath caught. "The scars on your back," Matteo continued, his voice never changing, never rising. "How many?" She stood abruptly. "You do not know anything about me. I know you have not seen a doctor in 6 years because you cannot afford it. I know you eat 1 meal a day. I know you have not bought new shoes in 18 months. I know Preston Mercer is the reason you flinch when men raise their voices." Every word landed like a punch. How much could he see? How much had he uncovered? "Why do you care?" Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind. Matteo returned to his desk and slid a folder across the leather surface. "Your employment contract. Starting salary $85,000 annually. You will manage my household staff, coordinate security schedules for Micah, oversee estate operations. You live here. You are protected. Preston Mercer never touches you again." She stared at the number. 85,000. More than 4 times what she made now. More than enough to leave. More than enough to breathe. "I am a waitress," she said. "I do not know how to do any of that." "You will learn." "Why would you do this?" "I do not do charity," Matteo said. His eyes were cold now, businesslike. "You saved my son. You demonstrated loyalty, courage, and discretion. Those are rare. I am buying them." She picked up the contract with shaking hands. The words blurred. "What is the catch?" she asked. "You work for me. You live under my protection. You do not leave without security. You do not contact Preston Mercer. You do not speak about this arrangement to anyone. That is it. That is it. And if I say no?" Matteo leaned back in his chair. "Then Vinny drives you back to the diner and you finish your shift. But Preston Mercer will know I offered you a way out. What do you think he will do?" The truth of it settled like a stone in her stomach. Preston would know she had rejected Matteo Conte's protection. Preston would interpret that as loyalty. And then he would own her in ways that made the past 8 years look like rehearsal. She picked up the pen and signed. 2 hours later, Cassandra was led to the 2nd floor, to a playroom decorated in soft blues and greens. Micah sat on the carpet building a Lego tower, his dark curls falling across his forehead, his green eyes, his father's eyes, looking up when she entered. "Are you the lady from the lake?" he asked. She knelt until they were at eye level. "Yes. I remember. You told me to cough. You said I was okay." She nodded. Her throat was tight. He stood and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Thank you." Her eyes burned. Over his head, she saw Matteo in the doorway, watching. Something in his face cracked, just for a second, a vulnerability so raw it was almost painful to witness. Vinny appeared beside him, whispered something. Vinny's eyes widened. "In 15 years I have never seen him like this," he murmured. At that same hour, across the city, Preston Mercer locked the diner door and pulled out his phone with hands that trembled. He dialed. When Evelyn Blackwell answered on the third ring, her voice was ice-cold and precise. "The Cole girl is with Conti," he said. "Then eliminate the problem," came the reply. "He is Matteo Conti. And I am Evelyn Blackwell. I have been cleaning up messes longer than you have been alive. Make her disappear, or I will make you both disappear." The line went dead. Later that night, in a guest suite larger than her entire apartment, Cassandra locked the door and slid down to the floor. She pulled her uniform from her bag, the stained apron, the coffee-scented shirt, the torn pocket, and held it against her chest while 8 years poured out of her in silent tears. A knock interrupted her. Matteo's voice came through the door, steady and calm. "Are you all right?" She wiped her face and opened the door. He stood in the hallway still fully dressed, his expression unreadable. "If you want to leave, Vinny will take you anywhere," he said. "No questions." "Why are you really doing this?" His eyes looked past her, into the room, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. "I had a daughter once. Before Micah. She was born 3 months early. She lived 6 hours. I never held her. I was in a meeting I thought was more important. By the time I got to the hospital, she was gone." His voice remained flat, reciting facts like a man who had told himself this story 1,000 times. "I have spent 10 years telling myself it did not matter," he continued. "That I could build an empire instead of a family. Then Micah nearly drowned. And a woman I had never met jumped into freezing water without thinking twice." He met her eyes. "You did what I could not. You were there when it mattered. So yes, I am doing this. Because the world has people who take and people who give. And I am very tired of being the first." "I am nobody," she whispered. "You are the woman who saved my son," Matteo said. "That makes you somebody." He left her standing in the doorway, the contract still in her hands, the rain still falling outside, the future still unwritten but no longer unknowable. But what Cassandra Cole did not know was that in 48 hours, Preston Mercer and Evelyn Blackwell would make their move. They would decide that silence was cheaper than justice. They would believe that one invisible waitress was worth erasing. And the life that Matteo Conti was offering her would become the only thing standing between her and a shallow grave in the Indiana woods. The rain hammered against the bus shelter like bullets against armor, cold and relentless. Cassandra Cole stood shivering in her mother's old coat, the wool so thin it no longer kept anything out, and pulled the prayer card from her pocket with trembling fingers. St. Jude on the front, faded from years of handling. Her mother's handwriting on the back, "You are stronger than you know." She was not stronger. She was terrified. The phone call had come at 9:22 p.m. Preston's voice, tight with a rage that made her stomach fold inward like origami. "You think you can just leave me?" The words came through the receiver like venom. "I own you, Cassandra. I have owned you for 8 years." She had hung up without answering. But the threat arrived in her mind fully formed, word by word, carved into her consciousness. Holy Cross Cemetery, Section D, Plot 47. Your mother's grave. The only place Cassandra visited. The only place she had left to feel close to the woman who had died telling her to be strong. Tell Conti and I accelerate the timeline. So she had done the only thing her 8 years of invisibility had taught her to do, she had lied. At 11:43 p.m., when the estate was quiet and Matteo was on a work call in his study, she had slipped out through the service entrance in her old coat, a uniform stuffed in a canvas bag. The November rain soaked through immediately, turning the streets into rivers of reflected streetlight. The bus stop shelter was broken, its roof collapsed on one side, water dripping through in steady streams. She stood there at 11:58 p.m., watching the numbers on her dead phone battery blink at 2%, and felt something essential inside her crack like old ice. I am nobody, she thought. I am nothing. I am a waitress with $200 in my pocket and scars nobody sees, and I am about to walk into a trap because I do not have the courage to tell the most dangerous man in Chicago that I have failed him. The bus pulled up, doors hissing open. Through the steamed windows, she saw a woman holding a sleeping child, the woman's hand curved protectively around the small head like a shelter. Like she had held Micah when they pulled him from the water. Cassandra stepped back. The bus doors closed. The bus pulled away into the rain. Her hand shook as she dialed. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Where are you?" Matteo's voice was immediate, no surprise at the late hour, as if he had been waiting. "Preston called," she whispered. "He wants me at the diner. Midnight. He said if I tell you, he will accelerate. He will do something to my mother's grave." She was crying now, the words fracturing. "I was going to go alone. I was going to handle it. I am sorry. I am so sorry." Silence stretched across the phone line. In that silence, she could feel him calculating, assembling, understanding. When he spoke, his voice carried no anger. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Do not speak to anyone. I am sending Pietro to you now. He will be there in 4 minutes." "Matteo. You did not run," he said. "You called me. That is enough." The line went dead. Pietro's black SUV pulled up at 12:04 a.m., engine rumbling like a sleeping predator. He did not speak as she climbed into the back seat, just nodded and pulled back into traffic. Through the rear window, Cassandra watched the city dissolve into rain and darkness. Meanwhile, at Mercer's diner, Preston paced the length of the empty restaurant, his shoes leaving wet prints on the black and white checkered floor. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar dying song. A gun sat on the counter, dark and heavy, a thing he had never needed before because he had always been the strongest one in the room. He was not the strongest anymore. Evelyn Blackwell sat in the back booth, composed, scrolling through her phone with the casual cruelty of someone who had never understood that everything could burn. Her tailored suit cost more than Preston made in 2 months. Her diamond earrings caught the light like tears that had hardened into ice. "This is the last loose end," she said without looking up. "After tonight, we are clear. No witnesses. No connection to the network." "She should be here by now," Preston said. His voice cracked slightly. "It is past midnight." The front door did not open. The back door did not open. Instead, 12 men in black tactical gear materialized from the rain like ghosts becoming solid, surrounding the diner in 45 seconds with the precision of an execution. No sirens. No lights. Just rain and footsteps and the sound of weapons being readied. Matteo Conti entered through the front door alone, his coat streaming water, his eyes the color of a storm that had nowhere left to destroy. Vinny came behind him on the right. Pietro on the left. The rain fell from his shoulders to the floor, pooling where he stood. Preston's hand moved toward the gun. Pietro crossed the distance in a blur of motion. The gun clattered across the tile. Preston's face met the counter. His arm twisted behind his back, held with the kind of casual precision that broke no bones but communicated absolute powerlessness. "Mr. Conti," Evelyn said, standing, smoothing her skirt as if straightening fabric could straighten the world. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Matteo said. His voice was flat, informational, the voice of a man describing the weather. "You have been trafficking women through this diner for 12 years. Using Preston to identify the vulnerable ones. Selling them to your hotel network. 23 women. I have their names." Evelyn's composure did not crack. Not visibly. But something flickered behind her eyes, a recognition of defeat arriving with the speed of a blade. "You have no proof," she said. "I have everything." Matteo nodded once. 2 figures in FBI windbreakers stepped inside, rain dripping from their shoulders. Bank transfers. Encrypted emails. Testimony from 4 women you thought had disappeared. "These agents have had your case open for 6 months, thanks to some information I provided them last week." Agent Torres stepped forward, her face set with the grim satisfaction of someone who had finally caught prey that had evaded justice through sheer cruelty. Evelyn Blackwell, Torres said, her voice steady as stone. You are under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy to commit assault, and racketeering under the RICO statute. You have the right to remain silent. Handcuffs clicked. The sound was small. It was also the sound of a world reorganizing itself. Evelyn stared at Mateo, and for a moment something raw emerged from behind her mask of control, not fear, but fury. You self-righteous hypocrite, she hissed. You are a criminal. You have probably done worse than anything I have ever done. Mateo's eyes did not change. I am a criminal, he agreed. But I do not prey on women. That is the difference. Preston was hauled to his knees by two of the men, his trembling visible even from across the restaurant, visible in the way his hands shook and his shoulders folded inward as if trying to disappear. Please, Preston gasped. The word came out as a sob. Please. I will disappear. I will leave Chicago. I will leave the country. I will never touch her again. I will never touch anyone again. Mateo crouched to eye level. The distance between them was less than 2 feet. You had 8 years, he said quietly. 8 years to stop. You chose not to. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Preston's apologies came like vomit, like his body was expelling something poisonous that had taken up residence in his chest. You will do 40 years in federal prison, Mateo said. The FBI has your financial records. Your assaults documented on video taken from your own office camera. Your connection to Evelyn Blackwell and her network. But that is too easy. So first, you will understand what it feels like to be powerless. Mateo stood. He nodded once to Vinny. Enzo Ravello sends his regards, Vinny said. Preston's face went from pale to white to a color that barely belonged in the spectrum of living flesh. No. No, please. Not the Ravelos. Not them. Anything but that. I will take the federal time. I will take all of it. You will take both, Mateo said. The Ravello family had questions about your side business in their territory. I have provided them with all the information they need. They will collect you in 72 hours, after your arraignment. What they do with you is not my concern. Preston collapsed, sobs racking his body, the gun on the counter forgotten, the power he had felt when he had dialed Cassandra's number evaporated like rain on hot asphalt. The FBI led him out first, then Evelyn, her designer coat soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her phone already buzzing with calls she would never answer. Outside, camera flashes erupted like fireworks. News vans had somehow materialized in the rain, their lights painting the street in shades of white and blue. Mateo stood in the diner doorway and watched the perp walk unfold. Evelyn moved through the gauntlet of cameras with the expression of someone who had finally understood that her money meant nothing, that her social standing was built on the same lie as Preston's power, the lie that cruelty could exist without consequences. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. Calls from board members, investors, society friends, all suddenly unavailable, all suddenly very aware that association with human trafficking meant erasure from the circles that mattered to her. By morning, Mateo's men would report that Blackwell Hotel stock had plummeted 30%. By afternoon, that she had received margin calls on her properties. By nightfall, that she had been forced to resign from every board she served on. Justice, Mateo understood, was not always a bullet. Sometimes it was the slow, relentless dismantling of everything a person had built. Cassandra arrived at 12:37 a.m. in the back of Mateo's car. She saw the FBI vehicles first, their lights cutting through the rain. Then the news crews. Then Preston being shoved into a car, his face streaked with tears and rain, his mouth moving in prayers nobody was listening to. She stepped out. Mateo met her on the sidewalk, rain falling around them both, soaking them both equally. "It is done," he said. "My mother's grave." Her voice was barely audible. 24-hour protection. 2 of my men are there now. No one will touch it. No one will ever touch it again. She nodded, numb, processing the fact that the threat that had driven her into the rain had been dismantled while she stood at a bus stop deciding whether to run or to stay. Matteo led her to the car. As they pulled away from the diner, she looked back through the rear window. The restaurant that had bled her for 8 years was now swarming with federal agents and camera crews, with the evidence of destruction accumulating in real time. The life Preston had built on the bones of vulnerable women was collapsing. The money Evelyn had made on their suffering was burning. And Cassandra Cole was no longer the invisible waitress running from predators into the rain. She was the woman who had been seen. And in being seen, she had been saved. 3 weeks after the diner collapsed, the Conti estate sprawled across 40 acres of Chicago's North Shore, and December arrived like an axe. Snow fell in sheets, absolute and unforgiving, and Matteo Conti drove north with Cassandra and Micah in a car so expensive that the leather alone cost more than her first year's rent. The mountain lodge sat buried in the Rockies, accessible only by snowmobile once the pass closed. The blizzard hit that second night, winds howling like something alive, and the three of them were alone in a house built for silence. Upstairs, Micah slept. Downstairs, the fireplace burned. Cassandra and Matteo sat on opposite ends of a leather sofa, the distance between them a geography of weeks and unspoken things. The logs cracked. Outside, the storm scraped against glass. Matteo spoke first, his voice like an oath carved from stone. You do not have to stay, you know. The contract was insurance. If you want to leave, start over somewhere else, I will arrange it. You have $85,000 now. You are free. Cassandra's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her thighs. I have never been free. She stared into the fire. The flames caught the scars on her collarbone that peeked above her sweater, a landscape of damage, a topography of survival. When I was 15, she said, her voice barely above the wind, my mother got sick. Cancer. I dropped out of school to take care of her. She died when I was 17. I got the diner job a week later. Preston saw something in me, something broken, and he decided to break it further. 8 years. I told myself I deserved it. That I was nobody worth protecting. Her voice cracked like thin ice. You are the first person who ever acted like I mattered. Matteo turned to face her. His eyes were dark, storm gray, burning. You saved my son. It is more than that. She met his gaze. You see me. Not the uniform. Not the scars. Me. He looked away, jaw tight, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Devastated. I had a daughter. Leah. She was born too early. I was closing a deal when the hospital called. I told them I would be there in an hour. She died in 40 minutes. I never held her. I never said her name to her. Cassandra reached for his hand. The nursery at the estate, he continued, not moving his hand but not pulling away either, 3rd floor, east wing. I built it for her. I have never opened the door since. 10 years I have told myself that empire matters more than family. That power protects better than presence. Then Micah nearly drowned and I learned I was wrong. Again. He looked at her. You were there. You did not hesitate. You did not calculate risk. You just acted. That is not something I can do. That is not something I know how to be. But when I watch you with him, I remember what it is supposed to feel like. She moved closer. Their hands touched. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. But fear is a living thing. It breathes. It waits. At 3 in the morning, Cassandra sat at the lodge desk with blank stationery and a pen that shook in her grip. The blizzard raged outside. The house was silent except for the wind, relentless, howling, scraping at the windows like something demanding entry. She wrote, Matteo. I cannot stay. Not because I want to leave. Because I am afraid I will destroy what you have built. Preston is gone but his shadow is not. I wake up every night convinced I am back in that diner. I flinch when doors close too fast. I count exits in every room. You and Micah deserve someone whole. Someone without scars like a map of hell. Someone who does not bring chaos. I know you will say this is not true. That I am safe now. But safety is not something I know how to believe. Her handwriting cramped, desperate. 3 weeks ago you said I was the woman who saved your son. But the truth is your son saved me. You saved me. And the kindest thing I can do is leave before I hurt you both. I am going to disappear. Start over. Use the money you gave me to become someone new. Please do not look for me. Tell Micah I am sorry. Tell him I think he is brave. Tell him his father is the best man I have ever known. She stopped. Her pen hovered. One word left. The only word that mattered. I love you. Her mother's worn prayer card fell from her coat pocket as she folded the letter. The edges were soft from decades of handling, the image of St. Jude nearly faded to nothing. On the back, in her mother's precise script, for the lost, so they know they are not forgotten. Cassandra tipped it into the envelope and sealed it. Then she packed her bag in the dark, silent, efficient, the movements of someone who had been running her whole life. She crept downstairs at 4:51 a.m. The front hallway was black except for the glow from the living room. The storm had lessened but snow still fell, thick and soft, erasing the world beyond the windows. She opened the front door. Matteo was standing in the hallway, fully dressed, holding a cup of coffee. The steam rose between them like a ghost. Going somewhere. His voice was not angry. That would have been easier. Cassandra froze, her hand still on the doorframe. How did you know? I know you. He set the coffee down on the side table. You think you do not deserve this. You think you are a burden. You think love is something you will ruin instead of something that will save you. She held out the letter, her hand shaking. Read it. He took it, opened it, the paper crackling in the silence. He read without moving, without breathing, it seemed. The prayer card fell out. He caught it, held it like it was made of glass. He looked up at her, his eyes bright. You are stronger than you know. That is what your mother wrote. For the lost, so they know they are not forgotten. I am not strong. You jumped into freezing water to save a stranger's child. You survived 8 years of hell without breaking. You called me instead of running into a trap. You are the strongest person I have ever met. And you are not leaving. She shook her head. I will ruin you. I have spent 10 years building an empire on fear. I am already ruined. He pulled her back inside, closed the door against the wind. You did not ruin me. You reminded me I am still human. That I can still feel. That I should still feel. The fire in the living room still burned. Matteo led her to it, his hand never leaving the small of her back. You want to know why I sent 30 men to find you? His voice was rough, unfamiliar in its honesty. Not because of gratitude. Because the moment you walked away from Micah at the lake without asking for anything, without negotiating, without protecting yourself, I knew you were the kind of person I needed in my life. The kind who gives without expecting. The kind I could love. She stared at him. He cupped her face in his hands. I am not good at this. I have spent a decade keeping people at a distance. But I am asking you to stay. Not as an employee. Not as the woman my son is attached to. As the woman I cannot imagine losing. She kissed him. Desperate. Fierce. The letter crumpled between them, and the prayer card fell again, this time landing on the rug, St. Jude watching over them both. 6 months later, spring had arrived in Chicago. The Conti estate garden exploded in color, tulips in crimson and gold, daffodils pale as hope, roses climbing the iron trellis. The lake beyond the fence sparkled in the afternoon light. Cassandra and Micah knelt in the dirt, planting flowers. Soil was under her nails. His laughter was bright, uncomplicated, the sound of a child who had learned that not all adults disappear. She wore a simple sundress, pale blue, and no uniform clung to her frame anymore. No apron. The scars on her back were still there, they always would be, but she no longer hid them. They were part of her map now. Part of her story. Matteo watched from the terrace, Vinny beside him. In 15 years, Vinny said quietly, I have never seen you smile like that. I am out of practice. You are doing fine. Cassandra looked up, caught Matteo's eye, waved. He walked down the stone steps and joined them in the garden. Micah grabbed his hand. Look, Dad. We planted roses for Leah. Matteo went still. His entire body went still. Cassandra rose, brushed dirt from her hands. He asked about the nursery. I told him he had a sister. That she is watching over him. I hope that was okay. Matteo knelt by the roses, pale pink, delicate, impossibly beautiful. He touched the soil with a gentleness that broke something in Vinny's chest to witness. After a decade of closed doors and sealed hearts, the man opened. Micah hugged him. Over the boy's head, Cassandra mouthed words Matteo had thought he would never hear directed at him, I love you. He mouthed back, I know. But here is what matters. Here is what the world needs to understand. Cassandra Cole was invisible for 8 years. She bled in a kitchen and no one saw her. She survived in silence and no one asked her name. Then a child nearly drowned and everything changed. Not because a powerful man decided to save her, but because she decided to save a stranger's child anyway, without knowing who he was, without calculating what it would cost her. Matteo Conti did not save her with money or power. He saved her by seeing her. By treating her survival as something worth protecting. By opening a nursery door that had been sealed for a decade and letting light flood a room that had been dark since his daughter died. Preston Mercer is serving 40 years in federal prison. The Ravello family ensured his first 6 months were educational. Evelyn Blackwell's empire collapsed in 72 hours, bankrupt, disgraced, her name now synonymous with cruelty and exploitation. That is not revenge. That is consequences. As for Cassandra? She is no longer a waitress counting tips at 3 in the morning. She is a woman who plants gardens with a boy who calls her by her name and means it. She is a woman loved by a man who finally learned that broken things can heal if you are willing to witness the pain. She is a woman with scars, yes. But they are no longer a map of hell. They are a map of survival. And survival, when it is witnessed and honored and loved, becomes something more. It becomes a beginning. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that invisibility is a choice made by others, not a truth about yourself, please drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear that they matter. Subscribe so you do not miss tomorrow's story, the tale of a woman who was erased until someone finally saw her reflection. We will see you there.